So Creon arrives, addresses Oedipus, and tells him that he has news for him. Here's what I've heard from the god, from King Phoebus. That is yet another name for Apollo. So we have Phoebus, Apollo, and Loxias as all different names for him. And Apollo has given a command, which is that we have to drive out a pollution from our land, pollution that has grown in grain. This is, of course, the same word we've seen so often in the Oresteia, miasma. And so Oedipus now asks, how do we purify? How do we get rid of this pollution? And the answer is simple. We need to banish a man. There is a murder guilt. There's a murderer in our presence. And until we banish him, we will not be free from this. And so the murderer, it turns out, is someone who killed the previous king, Laius. So Laius was the previous king, and he was murdered. And we need to find out who killed him, because that person is living here in this land, and until we get rid of the killer of the previous king, this plague remains. Okay? And Creon says, we'll find a clue here in this land. And once we find that clue, then we'll be able to find the man. So notice now, one thing to point out here already is how quickly Oedipus jumps on this. Notice he jumps on it at line 122. Where are they in the world? Where was he killed? Oedipus is someone who gained renown because of the keenness of his intellect, right? I mean, he's the one who solved the riddle of the Sphinx even when no one else could. And so this seems like a task that is ready-made for someone like Oedipus. His gifts seem like ones that could also help Thebes in this instance as they did in the prior. All right? So what we learn now, too, is that there was one survivor from the killing of Laius. And so Oedipus says we need to find him. And apparently the killing happened when some robbers were encountered, and it was the hands of these robbers that killed him. And it was no man's single power. So it sounds like it was a group of men. Okay? And when Creon says, look, when this happened, we never were able to solve it. Right after Laius died and was murdered in this way, the riddling Sphinx was here, and we neglected this crime, and we instead just tried to solve the problem that had been created by the Sphinx. Okay? So, now take a look at Oedipus's first speech here. He says, I will bring this to light again. So he's going to bring it into the light. And he says, justly you will see in me an ally, a champion of my country and the god. For when I drive pollution from the land, I will not serve a distant friend's advantage, but act in my own interest. Whoever he was that killed the king may readily wish to dispatch me with his murderous hand. So helping the dead king, I help myself. Now, of course, as with the other Greek tragedies we've read, the audience knows the story here. So they know what's going to be discovered about Oedipus. And so the dramatic irony here is really profound, and this is the beginning of it. Oedipus describes himself as a champion of my country and the god. Well, we're going to see what kind of a champion of the country he is. He says that he's not going to serve a distant friend's advantage, but act in his own interest. Well, in a way, he's going to act in his own interest, but in yet another way that he doesn't see or anticipate, he's going to be acting exactly opposed to his own interest. And so, same with what he says here at the end. So, helping the dead king, I help myself. And we're going to see here that, in fact, in helping the dead king, he's going to bring great harm upon himself. Okay? So, that is the opening here. We now launch into a long choral ode that basically speaks to the origin of Thebes and speaks to its current state of plague, that is asking for being lifted and delivered from this suffering. And then we move on to the next page and we see that the ode continues. And now our next screencast will be with the return of Oedipus after this choral ode.